Welcome everyone to our webinar presentation, what have you, on setting up the account-based selling organization. It's a topic that's near and dear to Ken's heart. It's a topic near and dear to my heart, as we are both principals in Ramped Up. And Ken, if you want to go ahead and share the next slide for everybody, give a picture of ourselves to everyone. There's Ken Morris over there on the left. He's our Chief Executive Officer. Ken came on board roughly about 4 or 5 months ago, to help us get ramped up. And Ken and I have known each other for quite some time. I am the founder of Ramped Up. Ramped Up's been around for roughly 1.5 to 2 years. Our mission, our stated mission, really is to help sellers, especially new sellers, as the company has begun to kind of iterate a little bit off of its original value proposition, but to help sellers in their targeted accounts. That's for our account-based selling solution. So a couple of housekeeping issues. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see that you'll have the ability to stay interactive with us. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, please make sure that you send those over to the, type those up, and we'll do our best to try to ensure that we can answer those questions, and we'll take them as they come. We'll answer them at the end, and if we don't get to them, we'll certainly get an email back to you if we've run out of time. We are recording this webinar, so Ken will make sure that we are recording our webinar for everybody. And we'll send a copy of the recording to all the attendees, and even if you have to leave a little early, we'll send out a recording to you as well. And make sure that you do stick around to the end, because there is a special promotion for all the attendees that you take advantage of account-based selling principles inside their own organization. So without further ado, Ken, let's get started, if that's okay with you.
All right, that sounds good. Hey, before we jump in, Scott, just so that everybody has some background, I have been, as Scott mentioned, I've been here for a couple months, a little more, but came from sales and sales management. Been in the sales organization for about 20 years, and with both large and small companies. Spent most of my time working with reps and just helping them manage, as we all call it, white spacing, and trying to get relevant company info and buyer contact. And then on top of that, we always, as most of us probably here on the call, we looked for, I did from my reps, metrics around calls and meetings, and obviously quota. So, one of the problems that Scott, you and I saw is this, the result of that is Ramped Up, and the tool that would help in and around account-based selling. So with that, Scott, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll bring up next slide.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that. And listen, the reason why you are attending this webinar right now is that you understand account-based selling is white hot, right? HubSpot defines account-based selling, as you see here, a multi-touch, multi-channel strategy coordinated across the entire company to pursue a targeted number of high-value accounts. And so account-based selling really is a different form in some instances of account-based marketing, account-based business development, or account-based everything, right? That's what our friends over at Topo refer to as just the entire company, staying on top of, just the targeted accounts. And so account-based selling is something that, that we as companies, especially Ramped Up, and some of our customers have found that there really is an added value. We'll share with you a little bit about some of those metrics, and going through the exercise of identifying the top companies that fit your ideal buyer profile, and then identifying the buying committee, and ensuring that you have the hyper-personalized message to those folks, right? So if we can go to the next slide, Ken. One of the things that's been quite interesting for a lot of us in this space, as Ken mentioned, he's been in sales and sales management for 20 years. I've been in sales and sales management for 20 years. Is that, this looks and smells a lot like selling. What's the big deal here, right? You see this guy to the right scratching his head. What's the big deal here? Isn't this just selling? And so in some instances it is, in some instances it isn't, right? And so take a look at these three main value props that we're going to touch on today, right? It's taking the practices of successful salespeople and sales organizations and applying it throughout the organization. That's the difference, right? So what we're going to touch on here are basically these three main value tenets to try to help you understand what our customers and other customers in this space are doing to try to implement these account-based selling tactics. So first and foremost, you want to target your ideal accounts, and we'll show you, what our customers are doing that. And then, moving on to, the different types of understanding the buying committees, and then moving on to hyper-personalized messaging. So first and foremost, targeted ideal accounts. So if you look here at this graph, we've identified three ways to help you target ideal accounts. The first way, RampedUp can help you with this in terms of, finding companies that use a competitive or a complementary technology. So if you imagine what that looks like, we'll use the Coca-Cola and Pepsi analogy, right? So, you want to find, if you're Coca-Cola, you want to find the people that are using Pepsi, or vice versa, right? SAP and Oracle. If you are Oracle, you want to find the people that are using SAP to do a rip and replace, right? That's a competitive strategy, right? A complementary strategy is one where your service or solution works well. A great example is RampedUp, right? Where our solution works well inside of Salesforce.com. We have an app inside of Salesforce, so we want to try to find people that use Salesforce.com. So that's the first one. The second one is analyze your customer base to find similar companies. So think about what that means in terms of taking your closed-won opportunities and finding the similarities between those closed-won opportunities in terms of industry, size, location, product, sales cycle, and the like. And then lastly, there's a bevy of companies that are out there that are in the predictive analytics space, companies like Lattice and Infer and Everstring, and I'm probably missing about 15, right now. But they have their own proprietary algorithms about how they help their companies find, targeted accounts. So let's, those are what we do in terms of looking for, our targeted ideal accounts. And Ken, what do you think there in terms of, how RampedUp is helping our customers in particular?
Yeah, well, let's just look at it. So I have the tool up here, and let me jump to it so that we can take a look. So on your screen now, this is our tool on the web, which has and displays, firmographic type information about the company itself, some tabs across the top, which we'll dig into, and to the right, some of the more recent news that is impacting that company. So this is as easy as typing in a company name, URL, and pulling up their firmographic data. And one of the things you mentioned, Scott, and we highlight here is that one way you can identify ideal accounts is by technology. So we highlight, and here you see for Skillsoft some of the technology that they're using on the back end. And when we say, and I know we're already getting questions, what defines preferred technology. So before I jump any further, I'm going to go on the back end and show you within the tool, there's an admin where we set up some parameters that will identify these accounts for us. And one of those that you will see throughout is preferred technology. So you identify based on your business and your product or service and what technologies would either be a competitive situation or a complementary. And you identify those technologies here so that we can identify accounts like we're looking at here with Skillsoft. The other thing, if you wanted to see just a kind of a broader list of what those technologies look like, then we do have a tab that jumps directly to the technologies that are in play in the account right now. So, the other thing you mentioned, Scott, was to find companies that look like your account. So obviously here on our screen we have a customer tab, and so you can see that one of the other things we do that's a little unique is that we look inside your company's wins, and we assimilate that data so that we can present back to you like customers for this account that you're looking at. So in terms of size, industry, and these are wins so that you have an easy reference point to kind of name drop and focus your attention on these key accounts. Another part is, we can go, and I've got another question here. Let me just, while we're talking about it, let me just answer Katie. So these, this company or this customer data, I'm going to click on this link to our back end. This is what we call the win vault. So what we've done is we've reached inside your company, loaded the wins, and categorized them so that we can identify what your target account should be. And you can see here's just some examples: industry, obviously location, size. So just to give you an idea about what those customers might look like and what targets you should be going after, and help you identify, hey, what's my strategy moving forward. So if we jump back into the tool, so now that we have this knowledge about what we're selling into and what we're winning, who we're beating, etc., let's look at a kind of a case study. So what I've done here is I just preloaded. So now I'm looking for accounts, right? What accounts am I supposed to sell into? So right here you can see what I've done is I've identified two technologies, Marketo and Eloqua, that we are complementary to my product. And so I've selected a search criteria, entered those technologies, and pulled up a list for me to dive into. So these would be obviously across the spectrum. And, if I wanted to dive down, I could then start, loading out a particular territory. So if I'm up north, and I know I sound like I'm from up north, so that's why I'm picking northern states. Then I could, filter this by my particular territory, or if I'm doing demand gen or I'm sales ops and I'm marketing and I'm trying to isolate targeted accounts based on technologies that we know we either are complementary to and or we compete against. This is one way that we can really focus our attention on the accounts that really matter. So Scott, back over to you.
Well, that's really a fantastic way of understanding not only the accounts that are important to us in a competitive or complementary strategy, but also, the people that work there, right? Which really is a transition into, understanding what the buying committee is. And so that's really our second value tenet. If you could, show this slide here, Ken, in terms of, understanding how many people are really involved in your decision-making process. So the Corporate Executive Board, CEB, now Gartner, has given their landmark study that I'm sure most people on this webinar have heard, that on average 5.4 people are involved in today's B2B purchase decisions. And so if Ken and I come from sales management, and I'm sure a lot of the sales managers that are on this call right now understand that we're usually talking to one, and it's the one person that'll call us back, right? And so what successful sellers do, and the way you want to get that average sales price up, is to ensure that you're talking to not only the one that calls you back, but everybody that has a stake, in the decision-making process. And so here's a little exercise that we do here at Ramped Up, and I've done at other companies, of trying to deduce who the buyers are on the buying committee, and you just back it out, right? So start from right to left, right? Think about when your solution is sold, who's responsible for making the ROI decision? Who inevitably will be held responsible for saying we did or did not get return on investment? And that's the title of a person. And write that person's title down, right? Next, think of go live, right? There's the go live piece, and who is going to be trained? What are the titles of the people that are going to be trained at the go live? So write those titles down as you see there. Who's going to sign the contract? Is that in that organization? Is it the CFO? Is it someone in procurement? Get that title down, right? Who's responsible for the approval, and who's responsible for the for approving this particular initiative? And then next, who are the decision makers? Who are the functionaries that are involved in this decision? And when you're done with all that, what you'll see is that you'll have a pretty good inventory of who the buying committee is. And so that's the next step. Once you've identified your target accounts, right, then you want to identify who the individuals are that will make those decisions in selecting your solution or picking your solution over your competitors. So 5.4 individuals, probably more. I think I saw something, Ken, that you shared with me the other day that It's closer to 6.5 now, based on I think what LinkedIn had on some original research they had. So share with us a little bit about, once you've identified the accounts inside of Ramped Up, how do we identify the buying committee?
Absolutely. Let's jump back over to the tool and take a look at. Let me go back over to the admin tab here on the back end as we're setting this up to help you in your account-based selling. We have a function called decision makers. So based on your buying committee that buys your product or service, we list those titles in a framework so that when we are out looking for contacts for a particular account, we use those titles, and then that's what we show you in terms of those contacts that you might need to be calling in on or to have contact with inside of an account. So jumping back over to another account here, and I just pulled up another account, DocuSign. One of the things that you might say is that, hey, once I know this is an account I need to call in on, who are the people I need to go after? So you can see right here, based on that setup where I've asked the system to list for me those titles. And if you remember, CFO, and there were some sales, and you see here what it's done is it's pulled in those exact. So not every employee at DocuSign, and let me jump back there. I think there's close to 2,400 employees. So what we've done is we've narrowed that focus down so that you can be real specific about the buying committee, who you're going after in that account, and can target those specific people that are on that buying committee and that you need to work with in your sales cycle. So Scott?
Well, Ken, show us one thing. Like, what if I pull up this field here and I don't see my my ideal buyer and they don't fit in? What can we do to go outside of the system if I have a unique title, or there might be somebody that might be a little bit outside of the normal scope that has an influence on this decision? How can a seller find that information inside of our system?
All right, great question. So you see there's a More Contacts tab, and I'm going to click on that. So it's going to pull up, first of all, it populates with the company URL that your account that you're working on right now, and it's going out and sourcing contacts within that company. So to your point, and let's just assume for a minute that we need, we have the CFO, but we need some of the folks based on our product or service that are in finance. So if we just by title, so we got the company URL, and then we have a title, and you can see what it's done is it's actually went out and sourced individuals in finance or with a finance title that would be specific to, maybe in addition to our buying committee, or now we've heard or gotten feedback from our team, our coach inside the account that, hey, this, the finance is going to be all involved. This will give us some good insight into an easy way to dig in a little further outside of our decision makers that we've identified by title in the system.
Cool. Thank you, Ken. So far, we've given you some tools to try to find your targeted accounts. We've given you some tools to try to identify the buying committee and associate that buying committee with the particular account. And then next, we need to give you hyper-personalized messaging so you can ensure that individuals are responding to your approach. So a couple of things that we recommend. SAP has told us that 90% of B2B buyers want relevant use cases to help them make purchasing decisions. And so one of the things that we provide inside of our system, and you can do this inside or outside of the system, of course, is whenever you speak to your customer, you want to provide relevant use cases. This is how a similar company in your same industry, a similar company in your same location, a similar company in your same size, and same value, same problems, has used our system to overcome those problems. And you want to have a library of those things, because the more specific that you can get, the better that you'll be, right? The second is really to you want to reference information that's going on inside of the company, right? And so we call those things triggering events. And so if you want to go to the next slide here, Ken. A triggering event is an occurrence that creates an opening for a sales opportunity. So think about what all the information that's available through the web, or you might have a Google alert or something like that on one of your target accounts. The real magic is to be very, very timely, because what will precede a triggering event, and Ken will sit here, I think what we'll do is show you, the 12 types of triggering events that we follow on Ramped Up, is to not only reference the triggering event, which is of course showing that we're on top of what your company is doing, but take that triggering event and show how you can help the organization either overcome the adversity that's the reason why it's a triggering event, or help them with a stated initiative. So it's not just referencing the event. I mean, that's rookie, right? The real pros state the triggering event and then tell people how that they can help them towards that triggering event. And Ken, maybe you can share with us a couple of examples of what our customers are doing with that.
Yeah, and so right before we jump back into the tool, I have here on the screen, these are the 12 categories, and from what we have seen, it covers the spectrum from both a product and a service. So as companies, again, we're talking about account-based selling now, not the individuals, but when one of these categories impacts the company, and we don't have to read through this. You can see the bold, the mergers and acquisitions, personnel turnover, legal issues, etc. They certainly not only impact, but they could cause those new initiatives that would influence a buying cycle. So let's take a look at the tool and what one way we can use that. So one of the things that we can do is, let me jump back to the account page where we had DocuSign, and we mentioned this earlier, and that is that to the right we had some recent triggers in news articles, but when we click on more trigger events, just within the tool, again, just like before, it pre-populates the URL for the company, and it gives us the most recent 7-day period for all the different articles that we have scraped from the web that are about or are involved with the company and can influence that. So you can see just in a quick glance right here, even as late as today, there's announcements about DocuSign and what's going on there in terms of partnerships, personnel changes. So if you said, hey, just like we filtered some of the other data, if it was won by, a particular state, where you wanted to know, and maybe not by a company, again, within your territory, you're trying to identify different aspects of your territory and what's going on, and or even with this account, diving down deeper, and these are links directly to an article. So when you click on them, you can do your study before you go and call and have a conversation, or you're sending documentation. I just had a question asked about, hey, what's the best way to reach out to an account? What gimmick is the latest craze? And what we have found is that deep knowledge, this hyper-personalized messaging, is really what resonates with people, because you can't get personal with them until you've earned that credibility. So by using a trigger event engine to help you identify not only what's most recent, but you could also go back, and maybe we want to know what's happening at DocuSign in the last month. We just change our event date range, and then get a better and a broader view of the most recent activities that are specific to that account or group of accounts, and then can really tailor our message based on events that happen within an account and a territory.
Good idea for the trigger events. And what about what can we help these guys with relevant use cases? What do you see there in terms of drilling down with the wins and the win balls, or the customers that are inside the battle card?
Well, when you do that and you're doing research, if that's what you're talking about, whether you link out and we can put the exact companies we were talking about before, where we're doing multiple searches, and let's just build out this use case where now I'm back up north and I want to know what's going on in my territory, and maybe even in my vertical. So once I get my north banks and construction and engineering, etc., those are some of the names and information and use cases we can actually use to build out a, I'm going to remove these names because they're not in banking or construction and engineering. That is what allows you to build out a specific message directly into verticals and territories that you are managing or need to call into, or you need to have your reps call into. So these are would allow you to do some marketing. So now you're not cold calling, you're actually warm calling, because you're going to reference an activity or an event that happened, and use that in your talk track when you are trying to penetrate a new account.
Cool. Well, this looks good, and this is obviously we come to the bottom of the hour here. This really is where the last mile is, or the rubber meets the road in terms of account-based selling. So as we discussed before, really the three key components to account-based selling are finding ways to identify your targeting accounts, and we've offered either a competitive or complementary strategy, or analyzing your customer base, how we can help you find those target accounts that way. Secondly, we talked about providing ability to do a deductive process, or go through a deductive process to try to understand who your buying committee is and take inventory of those individuals. And then once you understand those titles, associating with those targeted accounts. And then lastly, what are you going to say to those folks to overcome the megaphones and all the other SDRs and all the other sellers that are trying to get these individuals' attention? And we gave you two suggestions, right? Those suggestions would be to use triggering events, or to use relevant win stories. So with that, Ken, I don't know if you have any questions. I see a couple here. Maybe you might want to go to the next slide that we have, and we can do some Q&A as we wrap it up.
Yeah, before we jump into that next slide, a couple questions, and I covered it, in the kind of the presentation, but I want to call them out just to make sure. You mentioned earlier somebody was asking about CRM integration, so we've talked about the Salesforce integration already, and we'll have some additional information about that, and we'll show some of that in following webinars. Somebody's asking about more detail on the trigger event feature. So again, I think today, just with the limited time that we had scheduled, we will schedule some follow-ons, specific to modules within the system and the account-based selling kind of framework, so that we can dig a little deeper into this whole concept of trigger events and how that impacts sales cycles. I answered this earlier, but just let me make sure. They were asking about customer tab and where is it getting the data. So we do, just a quick jump back, so the win stories, we actually use your company's win stories. So this is, again, a unique proposition for us, where we are going in, so we're not providing you data from the outside. We're actually coming inside, looking at your wins, assimilating that data, and then pushing those into helping you identify specific accounts based on those wins, and driving that into sales cycles. And then last, if I jump right back out to where we were, verticals. As I opened up this company verticals, you can see that there is no vertical that we don't have included in the tool. So that's all included in terms of verticals. So With that, Scott, I think unless you had or see any other questions, that's all I see in the queue. And if we get some others, as you mentioned before, we can follow up with a direct email.
I have one question here talking more about the customer level information, because can we see an example of a win story? Do you have anything where you can show what a win story looks like and what?
Absolutely. So just while I'm on the tool right here, I'll click on my wins. These are categorized and win stories that are specific to a win that just shows details about products that were sold and to who, etc. So, and if you said, hey, what about, I saw that on your customer tab. So if I jump back here, that's exactly what we're doing here. So we're linking out to this exact win so that you can see specifically what was done on that win for that company size. And these numbers are actually linked out to total sales so that you can see, there's a quick name drop. So these are companies that were sold that were the same size, etc. So, and you can go on down the line. So hopefully that answers the question. And if not, again, Scott, I think we'll certainly dig a little deeper into how that feature and function works in our follow-on webinars.
Okay. Sounds good. That's the only questions that I have here.
All right, great. Well, then I'm going to... Yep.
Cool. Great. So as we mentioned, for anybody that, thank you for sticking around and thank you for joining us. We understand that, account-based selling is white hot right now. Account-based marketing, account-based everything. Account-based is a very popular term, and for good reason, as we understand. It really is the concepts of sales and marketing and even finance and your go-to-market strategy, all geared around the people that are most likely to buy your solution, that provide the highest contract value and be the most satisfied with your solution. And that really is what account-based selling is. And so as you see here, we've discussed these three tenets, these value tenets today, taught you how to target ideal accounts, identify the buying committee and associating the buying committee with those ideal accounts, and then two different ways to provide hyper-personalized messaging to cut above the noise. So those are the value tenets of account-based selling, and we would love to share with the individuals that are presenting or individuals that are viewing our solutions here and all the participants of the attendees of the webinar. You have access to 30 days of account-based selling on us. So we'll follow up with some communication to those that are viewing this webinar now to see if you'd like to take advantage of this 30-day trial of account-based selling and see everything that you've seen here. Help you identify target accounts, identify the buying committee, and have hyper-personalized messaging. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody again for their time and energy. I know and attention. I know nobody has 30 or 40 minutes out of the day, so we certainly appreciate the time that you've given us. And Ken, anything else to say in signing off?
No, just enjoyed being with everybody, and thank you for joining us, and we will see you again soon on another webinar.
All right, thank you guys very much.